They used my money to fund my sister's dream wedding. But I wasn't invited, so I canceled the booking and ruined the wedding. They always knew how to phrase it. Softened voices, lowered gazes, honeyed guilt behind every syllable. "Just a small favor," they'd said, as if it was barely a burden at all. My mother had called first, her voice half wrapped in nostalgia and obligation, playing the role of peacekeeper. "We just need to borrow a little from your savings, sweetheart, for a deposit, until we figure things out. You're always so responsible." No specifics, no figures, no names. But then, that's how it always started, with the illusion of familial closeness masking the deeper rot. Of course I gave it. I gave it the way I always did, quickly, without question, the same way I had paid for Dad's medication when he refused insurance out of pride, or when my sister crashed her car senior year and they needed a miracle. I gave and gave because that was the role assigned to me since adolescence. The reliable one, the problem solver, the financial cushion nobody ever thought to fluff. It was easier to say yes than to challenge the chorus of need. Weeks passed, then a month. I barely thought about the transfer after that. Life had dulled into its familiar routine, quiet, predictable, isolated. I worked my long hours. I brewed my bitter coffee. I went home to my empty apartment and sank into my routines like quicksand. Until I saw it. Not a call, not a message. A post. A glittering engagement shoot, flooded across social media. My sister Lila, posing beneath a canopy of cherry blossoms, ring hand held high, fiancé grinning beside her like a mannequin blessed with too much dental polish. Captions filled with hashtags like dream wedding and finally forever. I scrolled, curious, detached, until I found it. The venue. A glass-walled estate outside the city. Expensive, obscenely so. I recognized it because I'd once looked into booking it for a corporate retreat before balking at the 5-figure minimum. The same estate I now found listed under my account on the event site, the one I'd used for work. Booked 6 weeks ago. Paid in full. My login. My card. My stomach dropped. Like stepping into an elevator shaft I hadn't realized was open. I searched through the rest. The caterer? My account? The DJ? A familiar invoice in my inbox. Payment confirmed. Everything tied to my finances. All of it running through me like blood through veins. And not a word. Not one single freaking invitation. At first I assumed it was a mistake. A miscommunication. Surely they'd forgotten, overlooked, assumed I knew I was invited. But then I saw the guest list. A spreadsheet someone had left open on a shared drive my mother had used for planning birthdays in the past. I wasn't just omitted. I was deliberately absent. I confronted my mother first. She stumbled through her sentences like a toddler learning balance. "Sweetheart, it's not that we don't love you, it's just... well, Lila was worried you might make it about you. You've always had such strong emotions. We didn't want drama on her big day." My laugh was hollow. "So you used my money to pay for the entire wedding and then decided I was too emotional to attend?" "It's just one day," she whispered. "It always is." I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't break down or threaten lawsuits or scream betrayal. I simply nodded, hung up the phone, and opened my laptop. Legally, everything was mine. The deposits, the bookings, every last contract carried my name, my authorization, my bank account. They hadn't even tried to hide it. They'd relied on familiarity, on precedent, on my silence. And so I gave it to them one final time. Silence. Until I revoked everything. 3 days before the wedding, I started with the venue. One call, polite, businesslike. I explained that the event under my name would be canceled, effective immediately per contract stipulations. The woman on the other end was sympathetic, assumed a breakup. I let her assume. The caterer was next. A boutique outfit specializing in French fusion and mocktail pairings. I sent an email at 2:14 a.m. with clear cancellation terms and a copied invoice. Their reply came 3 hours later with a refund confirmation. The DJ, a man with a social media presence larger than his resume, was the easiest. "Are you sure?" he asked. "It's kinda late." "Positive," I said. "Plans changed." He grunted. "Sucks for the couple, doesn't it just?" On the morning of the wedding, I stayed in bed. I let the sun crawl across my sheets and sipped my coffee as the messages started flooding in. First from Lila, then from my mother. then a cacophony of numbers I didn't recognize. Panic etched in every word. Where are the vendors? What the hell happened? Why is the gate locked? Why is there a note on the door? The note. That had been a small indulgence, I admit. A final punctuation mark on a story they'd written without me. I had printed it on cardstock, elegant calligraphy, no profanity, no threats. This wedding was brought to you by Betrayal. Unfortunately, the sponsor has pulled out. By noon, I was infamous. By evening, I was the family pariah. My aunt called me vindictive. My cousin texted a single word, savage. And my sister? She didn't speak to me, not directly. But she posted a story, mascara running, dress pristine, standing alone under an empty arbor. No guests, no music, no celebration, just disappointment, as curated and artificial as the photos that preceded it. They called me cruel, vengeful, spiteful. I called it arithmetic, the kind of balance you only get by subtraction. The fallout came in waves, not immediate, not volcanic, no screaming phone calls or door-pounding confrontations, just the slow, suffocating swell of whispered rage and passive-aggressive silences, the kind that creeps under your doorframe and lingers like mold in forgotten corners. The day after the wedding that wasn't, I opened my inbox to a torrent of subject lines ranging from the desperate to the accusatory. "Please talk to me," bled into, "What have you done?" And somewhere beneath the rubble, I found the occasional, "You've gone too far." I didn't respond, not because I was above it, not because I believed in some poetic form of restraint. I just didn't care. Not in the way they wanted me to, not in the way they expected I still would. You see, they had made a calculation, a gamble that I would roll over and accept my assigned role one more time. Quiet financier, invisible sibling, the ghost at the table who paid the bill and then politely excused themselves before the dessert. But I had stepped out of their script, and now they had no idea what to do with me. The silence I returned wasn't a cry for attention. It was a statement. I am no longer available for your convenience. It didn't take long before they turned on each other. From what I gathered, through a combination of whispered texts from my cousin Mara and screenshots of rapidly deleted Facebook comments, the blame game had begun almost as soon as the guests arrived at the locked venue. My mother had tried to deflect, said something about a clerical error. My father, ever the diplomat, tried to keep people calm by offering to move the ceremony to their backyard until the catering never arrived and the DJ no-showed. Then it got messy. Apparently, Lila had screamed at our mother in front of everyone, accusing her of being too cheap to handle things herself, which was ironic, given that none of them had spent a cent. One of the bridesmaids got drunk and smuggled in by an aunt and fell into the decorative fountain. My uncle, whose name I had forgotten until that day, tried to deliver a toast about forgiveness and was shouted down mid-sentence. It was all so beautifully unsalvageable. A dream day collapsed under the weight of its own stolen scaffolding. But they didn't just lose the wedding. No, the damage ran deeper than that. I had made sure of it, because while the emotional chaos unraveled in real time, I was already 4 steps ahead, backtracking through every lie they had told me. I went through my financial records with surgical precision, line by line, peeling away every expense they had camouflaged as something else. The medical bills that were actually down payments for designer shoes. The urgent repairs that translated into spa weekends. I gathered the proof and built a ledger of betrayal, time-stamped and annotated. Then I sent it. Not to them, of course. That would be too direct, too easy to twist into some new narrative of me being vindictive. No, I sent it to someone who still had the power to ruin their already splintering illusion of unity. My grandmother, matriarch, keeper of family reputation, devout believer in appearances. She had always been distant from the day-to-day drama, too preoccupied with maintaining the family's image in her circles of socialite friends and garden club tyrants. But I knew she'd care about the money, and the deceit, and the public humiliation of a wedding scandal that had already started to trickle through the grapevine. The fallout from that move was slow but seismic. I didn't hear from her directly. She was far too proud for that. But the silence that followed in the family group chat was telling. Birthday posts went unanswered. Holiday plans were met with vague excuses. Invitations vanished. They weren't punishing me. They were scrambling, trying to reassemble their broken puzzle without the central piece they'd spent years undervaluing. And without that piece, everything sagged inward, misshapen and exposed. Lila tried to reach out once. Just once. A message. Simple. Short. Almost surgical. You didn't have to destroy everything. No apology, no acknowledgement, just the implication that I had taken it too far. I stared at that message for a long time. Hours, maybe. Not out of indecision, but because I wanted to remember how it felt. The smallness of her words, the sheer audacity of painting herself as the victim after carving me out of her fantasy like a tumor. Then I replied, "You're right. I didn't have to. I chose to." No other words. No venom. Just clarity. She never responded. I didn't expect her to. In the weeks that followed, life returned to its quiet rhythm. But it was different now. Lighter, in a way I hadn't anticipated. There was no wedding to feign interest in. No dinners I had to attend out of guilt. No group messages about napkin colors or playlist suggestions. Just space. Blessed vacant space. It gave me time to think, to remember the subtle ways I'd been shrinking for years, the jokes at my expense, the dismissals, the way my accomplishments were always framed as convenient rather than earned. I had built a life in the shadows of people who only remembered me when they needed light to see their own reflections. Now, without me, they were fumbling in the dark. The best part? I didn't miss them. I took long walks without checking my phone, cooked elaborate meals just for myself, read books I had forgotten I owned. I watched the seasons begin to shift through the windows of a home I paid for entirely on my own, and for the first time in my adult life, it actually felt like mine. There was peace in the isolation, not the kind that numbs, but the kind that heals. The kind that grows in the scorched soil after you finally stop watering dead things. But I knew this wasn't the end. No, not yet. Families like mine don't just disappear. They regroup, they strategize, they find new ways to re-enter, reframe, revise. So, I stayed ready, not for battle, not anymore, but for the quiet re-emergence of old habits in new disguises. They would come back eventually, and when they did, I'd be waiting. Not with open arms, but with open eyes. It took 2 months for the silence to crack. Not the silence I had created. Mine had grown roots, sturdy and deliberate. I mean theirs. That stilted hush I knew wasn't real. It was a placeholder, a wound waiting to scab. They weren't done with me, not really. They were merely regrouping, carefully building the narrative that would make them the victims of my decision, erasing their theft with each retelling, until one day they could present themselves as the ones who were wronged. They didn't want resolution. They wanted me to repent. It began with a letter. An actual handwritten letter. My mother's familiar cursive danced across cream-colored paper, as though elegance might compensate for the rot beneath. She wrote of forgiveness, of healing, of how families should not be torn apart over misunderstandings. She referred to the wedding debacle as an unfortunate miscommunication. Not theft, not betrayal, miscommunication, as though I had mistaken a knife for a handshake. She ended it with a suggestion, not an apology, not a question, a suggestion. Come home for dinner. Let's talk. We all need closure. Closure. A word people like her used when they wanted you to stop being angry before they had to start being accountable. Still, I went. Not out of some naive belief that redemption was possible, but because I wanted them to look me in the eyes. I wanted to see if they could. I wanted to be there when they finally realized that I was no longer theirs to manipulate. The house was exactly the same. The hydrangeas she never watered still bloomed from muscle memory. The porch light buzzed with dying insects. Inside, the air was thick with nostalgia and cheap candle wax. That synthetic lavender scent she thought made things seem calm. They had all assembled already. My parents, Lila, her fiancé, now just Brian again, stripped of the glossy title. Even my grandmother had made the effort, stiff in her antique chair, eyes sharp beneath her powdered lids. I didn't sit. My mother started to speak, but I raised a hand and interrupted. I'm only here to say one thing. After that, you'll never hear from me again. The room stilled. I've reviewed every cent that's ever passed between us. I have statements, emails, records going back 10 years, every so-called favor, every lie wrapped in a plea. I've documented it all. I've also spoken to a lawyer, not for court, not for revenge, just so I'd understand what it means when someone weaponizes trust and calls it family. Lila's eyes narrowed, but she stayed quiet. You can call me dramatic, bitter, spiteful. It doesn't matter anymore. You did what you did, and I did what I had to." My father exhaled, tired. "You embarrassed us. You humiliated your sister in front of the whole community." I met his gaze. "And you stole from me, repeatedly, casually, like it was your right." "It wasn't theft," my mother snapped, her voice cracking under its practiced poise. "You always had more. You never had children or real responsibilities. It was just a bit of help here and there." "That wasn't help," I said. "That was parasitism. You fed off me, and when I stopped bleeding, you called me selfish." My grandmother's voice broke the tension. Her tone was colder than I'd ever heard it. "You have proof?" I turned to her. "I sent it. The files. Everything. Check your email." She nodded once. That was all. Then Lila stood, the chair scraping harshly against the tile. Her smile was brittle, her posture perfect, just like always. "I didn't want you there because I knew you'd ruin it. You're incapable of being happy for anyone else." "You're confusing honesty with sabotage," I said. "And I didn't ruin your wedding. You did. When you built it on someone else's wallet and then decided they weren't good enough to attend." Brian shifted uncomfortably beside her, eyes averted. He hadn't said a word the whole time. Maybe he finally saw what I had always known. Lila loved optics, not people. There was no shouting, no final screaming match, just an oppressive, heavy silence, the kind that settled when everyone knows the truth has landed and there's nothing left to throw at it. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "You no longer have that power. I'm not coming back. There will be no next dinner, no next holiday, no next favor. I've closed the books. We're square." And I meant it. I walked out without a backward glance. That night, I deleted the group chat, removed myself from every family thread, blocked the numbers. I transferred my accounts to a different bank, set up alerts on every card. The logistics of cutting ties were clinical, methodical, a cleansing. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I booked a trip, not for work, not for obligation, for me. A coastal town with cliffs that bled into a gray sea, quiet streets, salt air, the scent of pine and tide. I stayed in a small cottage with a fireplace and a window seat. I brought books I never finished and tea I didn't need to share. I walked alone, laughed aloud in empty rooms. Cried, once, not from pain but from relief. I had expected to feel loneliness. Instead, I felt sovereignty. My life reclaimed, no more borrowed futures, no more guilt masquerading as love, no more hands outstretched only when they wanted something. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to the storm. I had stepped beyond it, into air untouched by their noise. It wasn't vengeance. It was liberation,